hopefully you all had a wonderful holiday and are ready to hit these next few weeks with the continued focus on these important topics that are supporting our districts as we move to reopen. So this one's been top of the list. We've talked about it for a long time. Our members have been just driving for resolution and support in this area. So we're really happy to be addressing the digital divide today. And I want to thank our panel before I introduce you, just for sharing your resources and your knowledge around this topic, helping our districts understand what is available to them, and allowing us to be a part of a conversation around a longer term vision for how we help support our distance learning through this work. So thank you again for joining us. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Tasha Davenport, CEO of CASBO. Sarah Bachez is our Chief Governmental Relations Officer. You know her from all the work that she does in all of our past webinars. And today we're joined by Martha Guzman, Commissioner for California Public Utilities Commission. And I'm sorry, it's Martha Guzman Aceves. So let me get the name right there. Thank you, Martha, for joining us again from the Public Utilities Commission. Robert Osborne is with us today, Director of Communications Division for the California Public Utilities Commission. And then we have Geoff Belleau, Education Programs Consultant from CDE. A very talented, highly respected panel. Thank you for joining us, and we're going to turn it right over to you to share this information today.
Great, thank you very much. And I will admit that my colleague and I, Rob Osborne, did not rehearse this, so I'm going to just do a quick intro, and we'll make sure we get through this. First, I just wanted to start off by thanking everyone in this space. I know that we have been particularly witness all of the leadership that's been taking place at the local level to find solutions, and really there's the greatest amount of creativity and really just consistently attempting new approaches until there's a solution has come from the educational community, and particularly, you know, the folks that are part of your organization. So thank you for that. And I really do hope that us sharing a little bit more about the programs that we have and the ideas that we have about moving forward can really start to build on a coalition for greater service for all of our students and all of our families. So with that, I'm going to maybe let Director Osborne talk about some of our programs in more detail and then come back around to talking about some of our policy ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm Rob Osborne, Director of the Communications Division at the Public Utilities Commission. I'm just going to go through some of just the high level, some of the elements of universal service and how they apply or could potentially apply to broadband. Next slide, please. So the first that I'm going to talk about is the Teleconnect Fund, which you all are probably aware. If you're not, then you should be. Schools are receiving, are eligible to receive subsidies from the federal government for broadband connection to the school. And the Teleconnect Fund provides subsidy as well to complement that E-rate subsidy. So Teleconnect pays up to 50% of the monthly recurring charges for internet and broadband. That's for all qualifying K-12 schools, community colleges, libraries, hospitals, health clinics, and community-based organizations with a $5 million max revenue limit. And there's more information below. And if you need to learn more about this, please contact me and I will hook you up with the correct people. In response to COVID, we have tried to mobilize resources on various fronts. From the Teleconnect Fund, we were able to secure $25 million to fund hotspot service. And this is really a short-term solution to address an immediate need. So we provided funding in collaboration with the Department of Education, who's been a great partner in this. We were able to provide a 50% discount on mobile hotspot subscriptions for over 400 small, rural, and medium-sized school districts for more than 104,000 hotspots. That program is slated to go through the end of December, and we're looking to see if we have funding to continue that into the new year. Next slide, please. So California Lifeline is a low-income program that pays for telephone service with some element of broadband, very small. Like the Teleconnect Fund, which works with a federal subsidy in partnership, the California Lifeline Fund also works with the federal subsidy. So the California subsidy is $14.85 a month, and the federal component is $9.25. So that goes toward either a home telephone, a wireline service, or to mobile. 80% of our participants, we have about 1.6 million participants in this program who are all low-income qualified. About 80% use the mobile plan. And the reason is generally mobile has more flexibility. You can take it out on the road. You know, it's much more useful if you have to make one choice. We estimate only about 44% of the estimated eligible population is using this program. And that sounds low, but it is one of the highest in the United States. But we would like to get to where the CARE program is, which is the low-income program for energy, which is greater than 90% participation. So that's really our goal. The offering is mandatory for the wireline services for what we call carrier of last resort. So those are places where the telephone company, generally AT&T or Frontier, is obligated to provide service, and they have to offer Lifeline. But for mobile, it's voluntary. So we're working on trying to find a voluntary plan that would cover broadband for students at home. And that would be in addition to whatever the family is getting for the Lifeline plan. I mentioned below on the slide that most Lifeline subscribers qualify as participants in low-income programs that already exist, so Medicaid, Medi-Cal, and CalFresh. And then finally, the last point I wanted to make on this slide is that we have upgraded the service standards for California beginning today, actually, to add more broadband to the mobile service. So I'm sorry this text is kind of small, and we can send these out later so you can have a clear picture, but ranging from 4 gigabyte cap up to 12 gigabytes. Currently, up until now, the federal limit was for 3 gigabytes. We're trying to increase the cap, but again, this is for mobile. And what we'd like to get to is a place where families are able to have a low-income home broadband connection that's subsidized. Next slide, please. So California Advanced Services Fund is a subsidy program that is used to subsidize deployment of broadband throughout the state in unserved areas, but we also have some offshoots of that, and one of those is the line extension program. This was created as a pilot as a way to pay for connecting homes that are adjacent to cable areas or telephone service areas where there is service. And so this is also similar to Lifeline, is a low-income qualifying program, and a representative can apply on the customer's behalf. So it could be, for instance, a Comcast or a Cox or potentially an AT&T. We've had some challenges with this program because there are so many restrictions on it, and we would like to open this up so that more families can take advantage of it. So that's something that we would like to try and expand definitely further than what we have today. And then on the adoption side, the California Advanced Services Fund funds digital literacy projects and broadband access projects. And there's some telephone numbers here that you can call if you need to learn more about some of the programs that are in place. And then finally, as part of the COVID response, we've funded devices, also in collaboration with the Department of Education. So as part of the pandemic response, we were able to secure $5 million that funded over 16,000 devices for 12 school districts. Next slide, please. So as part of the pandemic response, and also as part of trying to bring broadband to the forefront on low-income programs, we have created a website on the CPUC website dedicated to being able to look up what low-income plans are available based on your zip code. So if you go to this link, you can enter a zip code of the area of interest and find out what programs are available in that zip code. So some examples include access from AT&T, Internet Essentials from Comcast, Spectrum Internet Assist from Charter. These are generally also requiring income verification. So some of the qualifying programs that allow families to participate in these are a National School Edge Program, Community Eligibility Provision, Supplemental Security Income, that's for seniors. So these are also things that are available. These are voluntary, they're not mandatory, and that's something that we can talk about later in today's discussion about the need for more mandatory programs. And that's sort of a high-level overview, and I'll be available for questions, and I'll hand it over now to Commissioner Guzman Aceves.
Thank you. Go ahead and go to the next slide here. Thanks, Rob. So I think some of the conversations we've even had with many of the school leaders, superintendents, all of the staff about thoughts is not a perspective for many of you, I'm sure, which is that hotspots are really not a long-term sustainable solution. Many of you know that many of the kids don't necessarily live in areas where hotspots have great service, and there's a lot of other reasons for it. I think we can have a discussion about that, but really what we're looking at as the ideal is a landline service that has really reliable, high-speed, high-capacity service, and unfortunately a hotspot really doesn't fill that need. It's also the model that we have now, as you all know, of really depending on the school for funding this is another element of why this structure doesn't work, that the educational funding be paying for the service is something that we think is not the most efficient. The other is this issue that I've been really heartened by, again, the leadership from the schools, is that service to all students means service to everyone. We've heard, I think, from all of the community here in the educational space that the home needs connectivity. The parents need connectivity to help their children. The parents need connectivity to really be successful now in today's modern economy, particularly with COVID. The home needs connectivity to be safe. So this is kind of another big reason why having a more holistic approach about serving communities and serving households versus the approach of serving children. That's just another key element of how we want to frame the policies moving forward. And most importantly, and I'll get into some of the federal dynamics with this, is we want to govern the internet as an essential service, as we have for a long time with voice service. Essentially, what the last couple of decades is we've created a legal construct, a legislative construct that says because this type of service is coming through fiber or coming through cable, it is distinct from what we have from voice, and we've started to degrade some of the very essential protections that we have with voice service, including universal service. Everyone should have access, and of course that everyone should have affordable access when that person particularly needs it. Those kind of core fundamental protections that we have with the voice construct do not exist with the internet. And I'll just give a recent example with COVID. We just recently issued an order that's out for comment that voice connections not be disconnected during the next few months here during the peak of COVID for obviously public health and safety reasons. We were able to do this since the executive order came in March for the utility connections of water, electricity, and gas. We haven't been able to do that type of protection for internet service. And it's just a core example of how our fundamental contract with internet service providers is lacking this social safety net. And so this is it's something to just the disparity on how we view this service versus our other basic utilities is so acute right now, where we've been able to maintain connectivity to water, electricity, gas, and now voice service. We have not yet been able to do that with internet service providers, and it's somewhere we need to really go. Okay, so what are these more tangible examples of what we're talking about to get to this place of having a real safety net for our communities and our children? Really kind of twofold, and I'll say these last couple bullets in the inverse, which is, one is we need to get more obligations, as Rob said, more mandates out of the internet service providers to get to a place where we are with the voice service providers. And it's funny to talk about them this way because many of them are one and the same. And so that's one strategy here, is to really govern these companies in a way that really requires more treatment of the service as a universal utility that it is. And one of the statutory constructs that could provide us this opportunity, if amended, of course, is known as DIVCA, the Digital Infrastructure and Video Competition Act. It essentially took, I won't get into too many details, but it took the franchising authority away from local governments and put it at the commission at a state level with very little requirements and controls. Certainly no requirement for universal service and no requirement for affordability. The second approach is, for the last few decades, we've been waiting on these internet service providers to, improve. Many of your leaders have been engaged in multiple conversations around, serving this household or serving this community. And there is also kind of a rising leadership from local governments, including schools, but more broadly, county board of supervisors, and even different kinds of joint powers, public authorities. Certainly, we've seen the leadership in Imperial of even irrigation districts joining with their local governments. And so the investment in local government infrastructure to be either directly new service providers or to facilitate new service providers. And so this is a co-equal strategy, I would say, that we really want to see investments go to government, local government, that is really invested in having all of the citizens served, essentially, and not necessarily waiting on the current market-driven companies to get to this universality. Okay, next slide. And just want to mention a couple of dynamics at the federal level. I know that you all have been already calling for more flexibility with E-rate, and I think that's extremely helpful. It's needed right now for this emergency situation. I would just say we should work on those strategies and really push the new FCC to give us that flexibility. But also recognizing at the same time that schools being the providers is not going to provide universality. So we kind of need to work concurrently to say, yes, we need to optimize E-rate, but we also really need to continue to push for all people served. Another element that the federal government is very much a huge part of is what Rob mentioned earlier, the Lifeline program. And currently the program, as we administer it in most states, we have a large federal component and a large state component. And so having the ability to really work with the federal government and making sure that that federal subsidy goes to making broadband accessible at the home is a priority. And then just to note this kind of, again, the reiteration, this is a federal construct that has led to voice service being distinct from internet service. And what happened, unfortunately, with the Trump administration's leadership that came into the FCC, they determined that broadband was no longer a telecommunications service. And that's what Title II refers to. And I don't want to get into too much of this, but just want to give you some awareness about how important it will be to have an FCC chairman and majority now with the vision to treat broadband as a basic utility, a telecommunications service. And that will allow us to kind of regain some of the ability to really treat this as the service that it is and start to really view it with the obligations that it should have to serve all community members. Okay, and I think that might be it, but let's see the next slide. Well, this is just going back to, hopefully the vision that we'll have with this administration. And I don't want to get too political on this because frankly, this is a bipartisan issue. All of the areas of our state that are facing this issue have, plenty of diversity in the political arena. But just to say that we need to go back to how we were treating this as a basic necessity that it is. Thank you, Tasha. I think you'll let us know if we should take questions now or wait for after Geoff's presentation.
Yeah, thank you. I think what we're going to do first, I do want to just comment, and we have questions coming in Q&A, which Sarah's going to facilitate those questions at the end. So folks that have your questions and enter in Q&A. We'll move to Geoff in a moment, but I really appreciate the recognition that schools are not suppliers of broadband. And to your point earlier, because they have led uninterrupted, we're building those infrastructures at the school sites and doing what needs to be done, which we always appreciate and admire of our members. But long-term, really not the solution. So thank you for recognizing that this should not be in the laps of schools. Long-term, broader policies are needed, and helping us understand that that we need to look at this utility as we do the others. And so, we'll move to Geoff, but I do want to ask, maybe at the end, all of you can kind of talk about how can we assist in getting that message, in pushing for the FCC to make that change. What can we do cohesively and collectively with our energy and efforts in this area? So I'll ask you to come back to that. But yes, Geoff, let's go to you. Thank you for joining us today. We're just in this conversation.
Thanks. Hopefully, you can hear me now. I was having the broadband challenge, and so I dialed in. Amazing how that happens in a broadband conversation. But yeah, thanks for having me be a part of this conversation today. Schools have been put in the middle of this because we're trying to educate kids right now, however, wherever, whenever, that's our job, is to educate children. And one of the things that came up was looking at the Budget Act from this year, where it started discussing distance learning. And a couple points I wanted to make in that is looking at distance learning and looking at how the Budget Act defined distance learning. Make sure you read that whole part, because distance learning can come in multiple different modes. There are some requirements that we should be talking to kids every day. The teacher and the student should be having conversations, but that could be a conversation over the telephone, according to the Budget Act. There's the part that we need to do, which is educate kids, and then there's the part that we all want to do, which is all of us join the 21st century and join 2020. And those are two things that sometimes merge, and I wanted to make sure that we pointed that out because we're in tough times. As you know, the superintendent convened a distance or digital divide task force early on in this, and still has that group available. And I don't know when the last time, honestly, they convened, or if there'll be time to convene again. And during that time, he was bringing the providers together to discuss this broadband topic with the providers. And it's not just the cell phone providers, it is all. And I appreciate the conversation that people said that mobile is kind of the short term, but it's not a long term. It's not sustainable. We can't do that. It really has exposed the haves and the have-nots, honestly, in homes. I mean, there's some places where it's just not there, and it may never be unless you do a site solution, just because you'll never be able to string a wire to a particular physical location in some of the rural parts of California. And so with broadband, looking at this at the school level, understanding we have the short-term bucket and the long-term bucket, we want to try to have inclusive plan where schools, I mean, we're good in schools. We're good at providing the punch and cookies and getting people together and talking about this at a regional level. But, you know, bringing everybody together to talk about broadband, finding the places where our kids live, because honestly, if kids are living in a particular part of a community, there's other citizens that on a part of the community who are not connected. And so bringing the whole community, whether it's a district or a county or a municipality together to discuss this is a good thing to do. One thing that I don't know if we've mentioned yet is heard mentioned yet is the Community Reinvestment Act, which is a fund, would be a program where there would be funds available to do this. And the thing about the Community Reinvestment Act, when you're talking about digital equity and bringing broadband and closing the digital divide, is making sure that we look at this from the whole community perspective, like Commissioner Guzman and Aceves mentioned. You know, it's the children need to be connection, but so do the adults, so do the unemployed. Like some people have said, from 8 to 88 need connection across our country. And so we've been talking about that and have heard that conversation a lot. Another aspect of this distance learning and digital divide are the devices. And one thing that we've heard is that
I can't tell if Geoff is building suspense on the one thing we've heard, or we've got, of course, a tech issue. So as you would all imagine at this point, we just wait for a moment, see if we can buffer through that, and we'll see if we can pick Geoff back up here in a moment. Of course, one of the top of mind questions for me is, did he have that beard prior to working remotely?
And maybe in the meantime, we could give him a shout out that Bob has said Geoff is the best, answers when his phone rings and coordinates on behalf of LEAs with the providers. Thanks for getting us our hotspots, Geoff. Couldn't have gotten that first batch without you. So clearly Geoff always delivers, and he's back.
And Wayne voted in, yes, he did as well. So Geoff, we were giving you compliments as you were out there, but we'll welcome you back to the conversation, and we can't hear you. Geoff, we're unable to hear you. We're doing our sign language to let him know. Bear with us for one moment, please.
Am I back? There we go. I don't know where I got left off.
It was a cliffhanger. It was a cliffhanger. You said there's one question that keeps coming up, and that was a couple of minutes ago. So
now I can hear you again. Where did I lose you?
After 8 to 80 years of old needing connectivity, and then you left us on a cliffhanger.
Oh no.
You said there's one thing you keep hearing.
And I'm trying to remember where I was, because I did go on to discuss something else too, and I don't remember what it was. I'm happy to answer questions, and I'll jump in as well.
So in order for folks to raise their hand, and if they want to participate and verbally provide us with your question, there's a hand feature. You could also type in your question in the Q&A box. We have 14 already, and I'll begin from the top of the presentation slide deck. There's a hyperlink, so you could upload the presentation. One of the first questions, and Geoff answered it, was, can someone put the California Teleconnect Fund application in that chat box? And that has been provided to you. I know that Grant had his hand up, so I'll ask Michelle if he can be unmuted first, and we'll begin with a live voice. It's always fun to hear real people ask their questions.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay, great. I appreciate this opportunity here in this call. I really think this is helpful for everybody. I just had a question. So as part of the CPUC, have you looked out at other districts out there that have resolved or worked on some of these challenges? For example, in Lindsay Unified, a few years ago, as part of our strategic vision, we wanted to ensure that all of our learners, we're a low-income community, but we wanted to ensure that all of our learners had access to our online curriculum so they can learn beyond the 8 to 3. So what we started doing was putting in infrastructure, not hotspots, but actual infrastructure, towers, point-to-point towers, LTE solutions like that. And fortunately, it's worked really well for us because when we transitioned to distance learning in a low-income community, we were able to transition within a day, move everybody off to, and get high-speed internet. Since that time, we've actually put in additional things to increase it even further. My question is, have you looked at models out there that might be good starting points for doing this on a broader scale? Our challenge is we've had to do it over several years because of resources are limited, as opposed to trying to do it quickly. Other districts probably can't do it over a several year period because obviously the need is very high right now. So and I know there was, I think it was Paramount, I was on a call last week that's got a similar LTE solution, things like that. So my question is really, what models are you looking at, and are those models sustainable?
Well, thank you, Grant. And Rob, sorry. I'll just say, and I'll turn to you, Rob, because I know you have far more experience and detail on this, that we have learned of many schools, beginning, when we used to be able to travel, I went down to Imperial, where they have partnered, as you know, with the irrigation district and the local governments and the school district. And the school district there is really leading, and they've done a lot of the builds or technical assistance on the big builds. But, some of the areas with the counties have the ability to have access to their spectrum, which has made the capacity and the kind of service a much better option. I would say that I think, what you guys are doing in Lindsay is outstanding. It's what I think Kings, they're doing in Kings County with the school district there. There are some real leadership out there. I would say let's build on that. In my ideal, we have the local governments partnering with you to help the capacity be more than just, the line of sight. Let's see how we can get more fiber into Lindsay, more fiber into, everywhere in California. And that's a partnership with local governments as well as school districts. So, I guess I would just say that we want to be helpful in helping you build out this model. It's, from my perspective, still lacking kind of the full community service option. It's not to say that what you're doing with the kids is not amazing and we should support. Could we build on that to actually have a full community service option? And, I think is Charter the local cable company in Lindsay?
We really don't have I think it's Spectrum or something, but it's really low quality. In fact, most people switch off of them and come onto ours is obviously free for them as well, but our system is just a lot more high bandwidth than Spectrum could even provide. That was our first, when we first looked at it, was looking at, okay, what do we already have? What can we build upon? We talked to our local utility provider to see if we could put things up on their poles. They wouldn't let us do that. So we ended up getting commitments from homeowners to be able to put dishes on their homes and put towers up throughout the community, but we really don't have a high quality provider. That's why we had to come up with it.
I see. Okay. And just on that last point you made on the utility access, if it is a IOU, one of the things we're focused on right now is to make that partnership more accessible. And we have a separate rulemaking on that, but even just on a case by case, we'd be happy to help troubleshoot that if it is Edison or PG&E in Lindsay that we could help with. But
great, thank you.
Yeah, Rob, go ahead if you have more thoughts.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just wanted to add on to what you said. I think what we're finding is there's no one size fits all for parts of California, and in some places, there's just a natural fit for those sorts of solutions that, as the commissioner said, are really amazing and really inspiring to see. What we saw in Kings County, they basically set up their own LTE network using spectrum from the educational broadband or broadband service that they got through. A lot of schools have access to those licenses, but in some cases they've leased them out to Sprint. So it's a matter of regaining control of those licenses, and then that may be the smallest part of the puzzle. There's obviously also capital and operating expenses, so there's a lot of money involved. There's also a significant knowledge gap. You need technical expertise to be able to set up that sort of network. I know in the case of Kings County, they worked with Huawei, and I know Huawei is sort of on the way out with regard to choices for technology. You also need the hotspot devices for the students, and then the availability of fiber for backhaul. So, as I said, I think there's no one size fits all, but what we'd really like to be in is a place where we have the resources to provide the technical support for districts to be able to stand up their own broadband networks, and either operating through the county or from a partner, a private sector partner or a public sector partner. We've had a number of examples from different states, including Utah, where counties basically formed joint power authority and put together their own broadband company, and now they're building fiber to the home throughout the state. So those are other examples of where communities have just come together, and the state has helped them on the technical side, but at the end they're able to bring broadband to the entire community.
If I could
I was going to mention.
Oh, go ahead, Geoff.
Yeah, I was going to add one thing about those schools going into this space. It's interesting. EBS was designed way back when for this very purpose. It was to deliver correspondence courses over TV waves. And it's interesting that we got away from that over time, and it became, honestly, EBS became a money-making part for because you were able to lease it out, sublease it out, and now it's like, wait, right now is when we needed to have it. But the thing with any of these solutions is that no one solution works in any two places, honestly, in California, because California is such a diverse topology, diverse. We're diverse. That's what makes our state great. And so, doing one thing in one, you have to personalize that part of it and make sure what the solution fits. I mean, like Commissioner Guzman and Aceves mentioned, it'd be great to have fiber, and we need to get fiber out to wherever it goes. But that's beyond us in schools. We just, we're not fiber builders. I used to teach IT classes, infotech classes. My kids strung copper, and we did that. But it's like, I never dug up and did fiber. That's just beyond schools. The trick with it is all of this, honestly, right now is in conflict with E-rate. E-rate says that it's only to the school, and the current FCC has said we don't have the authority to do that. The previous FCC under President Obama felt like they didn't have the authority to extend past the school. So anything there, we have to make sure we don't risk and jeopardize our E-rate to the school. And ultimately, the part that fits in my thing is the E-rated sections of the high-speed network that they ultimately connect to at the county office and then into the state. We utilize up to, I think it's $8 million of E-rate every year, and California schools use $350 million of E-rate every year. And so we don't want to jeopardize that and say, well, let's risk that by extending this out to the home because of the rules. And honestly, I know there was a question, maybe I'm jumping ahead here. The best way to do this, honestly, though, is to go to the legislature in DC. The FCC is going to do what the FCC does, but the FCC actually has to do what our senators and our representatives do. So if we get a bill through that says we're going to change this, talking to our senators, anytime I'm in DC, I always try to stop and talk to the staffers there about how good E-rate is and how the benefits of it, how it helps it, and what we really need. They're very interested, but ultimately that is going to be where we can kind of keep getting this moving forward, is with our representatives, because the FCC and the commission is by people, but they ultimately need to follow what the laws say. and we'll see what happens with it. We've seen what's happened the last 4 years, but I'm very concerned that our schools don't give up that $350 million of E-rate that comes to the school and jeopardize our E-rate to the high-speed network, even in the short term. Because the one thing I've learned about USAC and the FCC E-rate people is they honestly have no soul. They'd be like, oh, you did that back then, give us the money back. And we don't want to have that happen to our schools at all. I'm on board making sure our schools are protected. So that's what I wanted to add.
And then we had a hand raised by Wayne Lacey, and Michelle has unmuted you, Wayne.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Wayne Lacey, the Director of Information Systems for Tulare County Office of Ed. And I wanted to thank Grant for bringing this up. So we are now trying to coordinate across our entire county for an LTE. We've been working with Imperial and Kings County. And I fully agree that districts should not be responsible for doing this. They've got a lot on their plates as it is, and most of them don't have the staff to be able to support this. So I guess my question is, with my superintendent's vision of border-to-border LTE network, internet access for all students in the county, is there a way that we could expand that and work with the CPUC or whoever the right agencies would be? Obviously, Geoff getting off of E-rated circuits, to be able to expand this and make this available in our county. He's willing to do the effort. I mean, we just ordered 40 more antennas. So we're trying to build this with the immediate need of the students, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't approach it from a larger scale and not make decisions now that are too small in vision.
That's very exciting. And we, there's a couple of themes that I want to make sure everyone comes across with, which is there is going to be a discussion in the state legislature, hopefully, and obviously in DC. And one of the key pushes that we should be collectively saying is, let's invest in our local governments, our local counties, our local JPAs, our local school districts, to make sure that the leverage of the ownership of the infrastructure is shifted and no longer kind of the E-rate dynamic where there's all these constraints, but really that you're able to build out a network, whether it's, starting small and building from there, that has the ability for the local government, be it whoever it is, because each situation is different and the capacity is different in different areas, to really shift that dynamic. And what I'll say about working together is, we could do, I don't want to overpromise, which is we do not have direct regulatory authority of these internet service providers, but we're committed to doing everything we can to help you build the biggest public infrastructure that you can. And it could be public-private, of course. I saw this in the notes here, the investor-owned utilities, that's what an IOU is. We can certainly help facilitate a better partnership with being able to attach infrastructure to the investor-owned utilities infrastructure. That's kind of a very small thing in this bigger picture, but just as an example of a role we can play. The other big role is if the legislature expands the California Advanced Service Fund. We have been pushing, and we're obviously working with the administration on this, to say the expansion of that funding should be prioritized to building out these local government infrastructure projects. And that can take place in many ways, but really building on the leadership that's taken place here and in many other examples to really help shift the dynamic away from the ISP model only to one of partnership with the ISPs, but giving greater ownership to local governments and regional governments. So that's a huge opportunity for us next year, is in the expansion of hopefully the continuation of the California Advanced Service Fund, the prioritization of that funding going to local governments. Rob, did you have any additional thoughts?
No, I think you captured it. Thank you.
I was going to call on Rob. It looked like he had something to say. I'm going to group Stephanie's comments. She's infrastructure in rural Humboldt County, mountains and landscape is my focus. Landline isn't practical here, but satellite works here. And then she made another comment that we also have one company that does fixed wireless internet access and long distance broadband. Wireless communication typically depends upon line of sight, LOS. I don't know if you want to expand more on that, Stephanie. I'm trying to make sure that I see another comment that you made of what do you recommend for our area to advocate for the needs of the mountain rural areas be looked at in policy considerations?
Sorry, are we going to respond? Okay.
Yes, if you don't mind responding to what recommendations
Sure.
would you want, would you make of them as they advocate for these particular regions, more mountainous rural regions? What should they be looking at under the policy considerations?
Sure. So as I think I said earlier, the fixed wireless solutions are definitely critical in places where you cannot, it's too costly to deploy fiber. But at the end of the day, all internet connections connect to fiber. And the closer you are to fiber, the better off you are. I know up in the Humboldt region, there is a project that's still sort of underway, and I'm not sure if I don't think it's begun construction yet along Highway 299 to go from Humboldt to Reading, and that would provide connectivity for those communities along 299, Weaverville, Lewiston, that area. And in those cases, the last mile might end up being a fixed wireless connection. But because of the availability of spectrum or lack of availability, typically fixed wireless providers are niche providers and they use publicly available spectrum. So it's not dedicated and it requires line of sight. So if you have trees in the way, if you have hills in the way, it's a no-go. So it really requires, it's more of a, I call it bespoke solution. It requires a lot of work to get the capacity to the location, but it can be very effective and a lot cheaper than digging fiber all the way to the premise.
Geoff, did you want to add?
I was going to mention, this is where the community coming together, regional approach is so important because what is happening up in Humboldt is definitely going to be different than what's happening in Kings or Imperial or anywhere else because the topology is just different. Of the state. And so coming together with everybody, all the different parties, education, healthcare, public safety, commerce, everybody in that area going, okay, here's our citizens. How do we, who's unconnected, finding out who's unconnected, what would be the most appropriate, best, cost-effective solution for our particular area, and then advocating for that because, the physical limitations. I think of 299. I drive along 299. I grew up there, and I've driven across, and that crazy highway slides into the ocean or into the river every summer, every winter. With landslides, and fiber optic cables go right along with it. And so there's challenges there that are unique to different parts of the state. And so education, doing our role as conveners, getting everybody together, finding who's not connected, finding solutions. And then making sure it's affordable. I mean, it really is the haves and have-nots, making sure that we don't leave people, parts of the state unconnected that need to be connected with and have them because, in a fire, people need to be reached out to. But educators, we're really good at bringing people together, taking notes, starting conversations. We need to stay in that role and do what we do best with that because it's a challenge. I mean, the fun thing about California is we have the whole nation, honestly, in our state. We have the Rocky Mountains in Humboldt County and in Shasta County, and we have Arizona in Imperial County. So our solutions we find here actually could be then used in other parts of the country.
And Sarah, if I could just add to that too, which is that we also should be seeking opportunities, and again, this is another call to the legislature in particular, about what the role is in some of these areas of the existing providers to really do more. And it could be from sharing their existing capacity that they're not using it to serve the area, which is a construct that we would really like to see, an open access to all of the internet service providers who do not serve an area but are literally passing through it, and other provisions that really the legislature can obligate the providers to do more.
And then we have two more questions. One is, are there solutions related to the new 5G network that could help close the digital divide?
So I'll start off and other people can join in. 5G is an umbrella term that refers to many different sorts of wireless services. Typically what's happening in the cities, which is where most of the 5G energy is being placed right now and trying to get cities to drop their permitting requirements, is a solution that requires millimeter wave frequencies, which covers about 300 meters, not very far, and it's typically placed on lampposts. That's not going to help you out in rural California. There's another type of 5G that will eventually be using, I think T-Mobile is leading this charge on the 600 megahertz frequency. We'll go a lot further, but that's not going to be really much different from LTE, except it will be faster. It won't be, a huge game changer. So I think 5G is a bit oversold in the market for obvious reasons, for shareholder value or hype. But I don't see 5G as solving, world hunger or changing things in a big way in California. I think it's mostly going to be an urban solution, and in some cases it will help bolster the rural coverage. But I think that we're better off focusing on long-term solutions that provide high capacity. And generally mobile is limited for capacity, and they generally have data caps. It's generally more expensive. And that kind of ties back to why hotspots are really not a long-term solution. We really think that fiber connection to the home wherever possible is the ideal.
Yeah, the thing I was going to say about 5G, I used to say that we were trying to roll out 5G to keep the Teslas from crashing into each other, and hopefully nobody drives a Tesla here, because I'm not trying to pick on Tesla owners. But I have been doing, I'm one of those geeky nerds that starts reading, and if you go research how much data autonomous vehicles, whoever pick manufacturer, doesn't matter, they use and transfer to the cloud every hour, it's in the 20 to 25, even higher gigs an hour. And go back to that slide we saw earlier that had, 8 gigs a month for a family. It just illustrates the haves and have-nots. One autonomous car, and it's those ones that are fully autonomous, down to the cars that are, remember the OnStar, the ones that have the lane assist, the ones that have stopping. All those cars are talking back to the cloud, using up, and that's where 5G is in there, because they need the capacity for the ever-increasing cars out there that are using that piece of it. And like I said, not picking on those, I'd probably drive one if I could afford it or prioritized it, but I don't, so I can say that. But if you want to look and see, it's very interesting to see how much data those vehicles are using. That's why we need 5G. And I don't know what they'll do up in Humboldt County if 5G is not there. Hopefully they stay on the roads.
And then the last question that I see is, how do LEAs keep from getting scammed by vendors who want to assist in setting up LTE towers? How do we partner with for protection?
I know most of the schools and most of the are on the site listserv, which is all the California IT folks. That's a great organization. However, the interesting thing I saw was comments earlier on about Wayne and some of the others. Early on in this whole distance learning environment, people in schools who were reaching out were not familiar faces to the site listserv, weren't familiar faces to the statewide conversation. And so I would encourage all LEAs to make sure they partner with the associations, they join out in the networks, the county office networks and that IT group, because those are resources that are kind of untapped sometimes by in some areas, and that would be a group where you could just bounce it off. I mean, I saw a conversation this morning going, what kind of patch cables do you like best? Seems random, seems little, but that can save in long term, because you're right. it's really sad when we get scammed. I mean, yeah, it was some that were using Huawei, and then it turns out Huawei was stealing our information. So join the networks. It'd be my recommendation there.
And I'll get that list, the listserv, so we could add it to the slide deck. Everyone will receive it tomorrow with the hyperlink to the recording. The way that this all came about is CASBO's taking the lead on advocating on behalf of our association, partnering with over 30 organizations at this point to make sure that broadband is a top of mind, top priority as we enter the 2021, I can't believe it, 2021 legislative cycle. I'm not ready. And it is top of mind. We have pivoted and we're so proud of our members, but I wanted to ask one final thought from each of our presenters as they head back. What would you leave? What can they do? What's the call to action as we're building momentum to ensure that this isn't the last of this conversation, that it really is about connecting our families and our students, that it is for their well-being as we try to break the cycle of poverty. That's what every educator's goal is to ensure a better future for their students. That's why they're logged in and very worried and doing things that are out of our comfort zone without fear. And so for me, I'll start with Martha. What is your parting last words to this, to our amazing members, and letting them know how can they reach out, how can they seek support from CPUC as they continue to navigate these uncertain times?
Thank you. And I will say a couple of thoughts. One is to ask you to do a little bit more work locally. And please, I hear the folks from Tulare in particular and all the leadership there that was mentioned today. Please take the time to meet with your local assembly member and senator. Let them hear about your struggles. You're doing that, but do it again just so that it's fresh of mind come January. This will give with two key points. If you can push the message, this is a basic utility, let's treat it that way. And we obviously are committed to working with Sarah and all of you through the legislative process to seek those opportunities to make it treated that way. This will facilitate your builds, and it will obviously facilitate the cooperation from the internet service providers. Treat it as a utility. And secondly, invest in public infrastructure. Invest in what you're doing at the school districts, invest in what the JPAs are doing, what the counties are doing. I think those two, taking the time to really educate the legislative leadership right now, first and foremost, is really probably the biggest opportunity. And there's going to be as Sarah's mentioned, there's a lot of discussion. The opportunities will arise, but we need them to know that we need to start treating this as a utility, and we need to invest in public infrastructure. Thank you.
Robert?
Yeah, just to add on to what Commissioner Guzman Aceves said, more than 90% of the broadband subscriptions in California are with 5 companies, and 3 of them are cable operators. So that just underscores the importance of having the cable operators serve everybody as opposed to just the folks that have the highest profitability. And so to that end, I just want to reemphasize what Commissioner Guzman Aceves said.
And I will just say thank you for letting me be a part of this and for doing what you're doing in the schools right now through unprecedented times. You know, and take comfort in doing the best you can. You know, we're doing the best we can to get through this. The other thing is, you know, I'm lucky I work in an office where, you know, the message is very clear. We are here to help and support schools. So if there's any way we can help, you know, if there's a project that's going on where the school's not connected, get a hold of me and we'll do the school's part, connect the school's part. I'll grab my library counterpart at the state libraries. We'll do the library. We'll get that, and then maybe we can then pull some other money together to connect the community and do it all together, as opposed to a siloed approach where we just got big connecting schools, a library doing the library, and then the citizens are left unconnected. So we are here to help. If you have any questions or if there's anything we can do, please reach out to me.
Thank you so much. And I know CPUC has left some resources that are attached to our slide deck. I will now turn it over to Tasha to wrap us up.
All right. Thanks again for such an informative conversation, and especially for those call to actions. And I know, Wayne offered the county as a resource, so I think it's good to know that we're supported out there. But again, really appreciate those very clear calls to action. And I think the advice to add to that is those conversations should happen now before January, so that we are ahead of the game in terms of having that top of mind. And also with such a new group coming in, it can, again, be a very compelling opportunity for them to seize as well. So making utilities a part, or this a part of the utilities, and investing in public infrastructure. Great way to leave it. Thank you all. Appreciate it, and have a great day.